I'd worked the counter at Miller's Fork long enough to know every trucker's order before he sat down, long enough to know which regulars needed a refill before they raised a hand for it, long enough that when the ground started humming under my boots on a Tuesday morning in early spring, I didn't drop the coffee pot. I set it down. Rye didn't move either. He was lying by the door where he always lay, chin on his paws, black and white coat catching the light through the front glass, one ear up. 19 years old that spring, older than any working border collie had any right to be, gray all through the muzzle now, a little stiff getting up in the mornings. Still the first one in the room to notice anything worth noticing. He'd noticed. He just hadn't decided it was worth standing for yet. The hum was a convoy, 3 low transports, the color of wet slate, settling into the gravel lot like they owned it, which, as it turned out, was more or less the point of the visit. We'd had aliens through Miller's Fork before. The corridor had opened up 18 months back, and after the first few weeks of gawking, most folks around here had gotten used to seeing them come through. Traders, surveyors, the odd diplomatic car with an escort that ordered pie and tried to pay in something none of us could spend. I kept a jar of Earth currency by the register for the ones who forgot, and most were decent about it. Rye had met plenty of them by now, and mostly he treated them the way he treated the mail carrier. Worth one look, not worth getting up for. These 3 weren't like that. These 3 weren't traders. The one who came in first was tall in the way that made you tilt your head back without meaning to, pale gray skin with a faint sheen to it, wearing a uniform the same slate color as the transports. 2 more came in behind her and didn't sit. She had a data slate in one hand, and didn't look at the menu, didn't look at the regulars frozen over their eggs, didn't look at much of anything, until her eyes crossed the room and found Rye by the door. Verdant survey, she said, to the room in general, in the clipped, over-precise English the translators gave them. Reclamation review, Sector 9 Delta. This structure and the adjoining acreage are logged as unoccupied agricultural land. It's a diner, I said. Has been for 40 years. I own it. She checked the slate. Ownership registration is not on file with the compact. We didn't know we needed to file with the compact. That is the difficulty. She said it the way you'd note a stain on a tablecloth. Not unkind, just filed. The clause is old. Land assessed from orbit as vegetated and unoccupied, absent a registered claim, reverts to compact stewardship for reallocation. Sector 9 Delta was assessed 11 years ago. Green canopy, no thermal signature above ambient, unoccupied. She looked up. You understand the finding predates your structure's registration. It does not predate the assessment. I understood it fine. What I understood was that somebody in an office 100 years, and God knows how many light years from Miller's Fork, had looked at a picture of Kansas from orbit, seen a field, and decided nobody was using it. They hadn't seen my father building the counter I was leaning on. They'd seen green. There's a dog in the sight line, the assessor said, and for the first time her voice picked up an edge, the kind you use on something that's supposed to already be handled. Unregistered fauna, structure interior. That will need to be cleared before the reallocation proceeds. The room went very quiet. Not the quiet of people not talking, the quiet of 11 regulars simultaneously deciding not to move. Rye still hadn't lifted his head. He's not going anywhere, I said. That is not within your authority to determine, she said. The animal is not registered. It is not native fauna under the assessment's protected categories. It will be relocated or... Rye, I said. Not loud. I never talk loud to him. 19 years. I've never had to. Stay. He didn't growl. He didn't get up fast, the way a younger dog might. All bristle and drama. He got up the way he's gotten up every morning since he was 6 weeks old, and I carried him into this diner in a shoebox. Unhurried, deliberate, like there was exactly one right speed to do it at, and he'd found it decades ago. He crossed to the middle of the floor, between the counter and the door, and sat. He looked at the assessor, not at her face particularly, at the whole shape of her, the way he used to look at a hillside of sheep before he decided which way to swing. Ears forward, weight settled, not a muscle wasted. He didn't bark, he didn't bare a tooth. He sat there in a shaft of morning light, with his gray muzzle up and his eyes level, and waited, the way he'd waited out storms and coyotes, and one very memorable bull that got loose off Route 9 in 2019, none of which had ever needed him to do more than exactly this. The assessor took a half step back before she seemed to notice she'd done it. One of the two behind her, younger, I'd guess now, though I hadn't known enough at the time to read alien age off a face, leaned in and said something low and fast in their own language. The lead assessor's eyes didn't leave Rye. She answered without turning her head. I didn't understand a word of it. I understood the pause after. Repeat the classification, she finally said, to the younger one, quieter now, and this time in English, maybe for my benefit, maybe because she'd stopped trusting her own read and wanted a second pair of eyes to confirm it out loud. Herding stance, controlled gait, fixed regard, no vocalization, no aggression display. A beat. That's not fauna behavior. That's command discipline. He herds sheep, I said, or he had, 30 years back, before the ranch sold off and Miller's Fork became the whole of his territory. He's not doing anything. He's just watching you stand in his diner. The younger assessor said something else, faster. The lead one's jaw, if that's the word for it, tightened. Your species classifies working canines as domestic, she said slowly, like she was working out loud through something that didn't fit the file she'd walked in with. Our own doctrine reserves that stance for command line handlers, trained, ranked. She looked at me, then back at Rye, who had not moved, who was not going to move, who was simply going to sit there being 19 years old, and utterly unbothered, until somebody in the room made a decision he approved of. You are telling me this is a pet. I'm telling you he's mine, I said, and you're standing in the middle of his floor, telling him you're going to relocate him. He's waiting to see if you mean it. 4 seconds. I counted them later, going back over it with Hank from the hardware store, who'd been 3 stools down the whole time with his fork stopped halfway to his mouth. 4 seconds of the assessor standing in that shaft of light, with a dog looking at her, the way he used to look at a hillside he already knew he could hold. And then she did something I hadn't expected any of them to do. She stepped back, all the way to the door, past her own transports. Reclamation review suspended, she said, into the slate, flat and formal, like she was reading it off a card that had just materialized in front of her. Sector 9 Delta, pending secondary assessment. Structure and occupant status, contested. She looked at Rye one more time, and something in her face, I still don't have the right word for it, and I've had years to look for one, settled into something closer to caution than contempt. Secondary assessment will account for working animal registration standards. This office apologizes for the oversight. Then the 3 of them left, unhurried, the way you leave a room you've decided you misjudged and don't especially want to discuss it. Rye watched the door until the transports lifted off the gravel, and then he turned around, walked back to his spot by the entrance, and lay back down with a sigh, like the whole thing had cost him something, though I couldn't for the life of me say what. Hank finally got his fork the rest of the way to his mouth. 19 years old, he said, and I still don't think that dog's ever raised his voice. Never has, I said, and picked the coffee pot back up and went and topped off his cup, because it needed it, and because the morning, as far as I was concerned, was already back to being exactly what it should have been the whole time. The secondary assessment never came, or if it did, nobody told me about it. A letter showed up 3 weeks later, apologetic in that same careful English, informing me Sector 9 Delta had been reclassified under a category I'd never heard of and haven't had reason to look up since. I kept it in the drawer by the register, next to the currency jar, and didn't think much more about it. Rye still lies by the door most mornings. He still doesn't get up for the mail carrier, or the traders. or the handful of surveyors who've come through since and been noticeably more careful about where they stand. Every so often, somebody new looks at the old gray-muzzled dog asleep in the sun and asks if he bites. I tell them the truth. He never has.